Okay. So this is, I should have checked the name. Brittany Simon's diagnosed autistic at 35 video. She did a reaction to Jacksepticeye Eyes diagnosed with autism video. I recommend checking that out. Very thoughtful thoughts on there. But I wanted to watch this video because I feel like there might be content that's a bit more like relatable, to me and my life. So,
Brittany Simon. In today's video, we're going to talk about
oh,
how
she
I got
says her name at the
assessed for
beginning.
autism, and I am autistic. Now, this is going to come as a surprise to basically no one, as many of you over the last few years have asked me, girl, do you think you're autistic? And you were correct. Now, let's talk about the journey, how it went, and why I got assessed.
Okay. So many of these videos are people being like someone else told me first and they were right. And yeah, that just brings me back to Hime. And me just being like, oh, I relate to like, these autistic content creators. Ha ha, how funny. And she's like, girl. and then um and then like Finn and I assume probably some other chatters just being like, yeah, we knew. Um
Now, if you're new
and
to
then
my
the rest
channel,
of
you
us
may not
going
know
on a
who I
journey.
am. My name is Brittany Simon, like I said. I'm 35 years old, and I've been a content creator for a very long time. And if you look back on my content journey, even though a lot of my videos are private now, I think you can kind of see why I've struggled to find my brand, to find my niche, to know what part of me I wanted to express to the internet in a way that fulfilled my career and who I was as a person. I think autism actually impacted this. As you guys know, about 80% of people who are diagnosed autistic don't necessarily hold full-time work. Now, the one job I've always been able to maintain is this one. This creative outlet, this comfortable place has always been consistent for over a decade. After every burnout I've ever had, I always came back here. And I think looking back, that makes so much sense given that a lot of autistic people are creatives. A lot of us don't want to work that corporate job. There's too much socializing and spoon burnout. So having something like this, where at least we can make our own schedules, even if it's still a job, it's a job that's flexible for our needs. So for
Okay. We knew. I think not everyone knew, obviously. And some of you went on a journey with me, which was great. But I know that some people were like, oh. Kathy says, I just assumed you were normal. I didn't even know neurotypical and neurodivergent was a thing. Yeah, you did mention that you were surprised. But I also think that yeah, like I said, it's because you didn't know about neurotypicality and neurodivergency. And so like there was just no exposure to even think about why like some things that you thought might be normal might have been because it's what you are like you like or you prefer to like so for example, I think it's very telling that a lot of people who stayed around in my streams, right, I feel like ended up realizing they were also neurodivergent or knew they were neurodivergent. And I think it's because we're like able to like connect with each other and tolerate each other in ways that like maybe other people haven't with us in our regular lives, if that made sense, right? Yes, and Mizu went on the journey with me. But I think that's really cool, and I think that was really nice, right? That some of us like started to learn more about ourselves after I was introduced to this idea, and I started to go crazy with the research, and just was sharing everything that I was learning about it. Um, yeah, that was really nice. I think that's one of my favorite things about this year was beginning and going on this journey with some of y'all. But I do need that creative outlet, even if I don't always know what that creative outlet is. It took me a while to figure out what kind of streaming I wanted to do. It took me a while to figure out like I didn't even know about VTubers, and then I was like, oh, this is really a great way to express myself and my ideas, and I love being able to do like music and song covers. But yeah, it takes time to figure that stuff out, but I do know that need is always there, even if I'm doing it for like nothing. You know? I don't monetize any of my content, but I absolutely absolutely need a creative outlet in order to like survive. And if anything, it gives me back spoons. Being able to do something like this allows me to get through another week at work, you know?
For me, when I think about it, it makes sense that I would have landed on a niche that's focused around people, philosophy, pop culture, gender, queerness, and all of the great things that, really brought in and attracted the audience that I have now, which is a group of really intelligent, open minded, introspective, neurodivergent people. And I think over the years, it's made sense that I would fall here and this would become my niche.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about. Oh,
Over the
sorry, I didn't want to like leave her on that screen cap. Didn't seem fair. This one doesn't seem fair either, but it seems a little better. But anyway, yeah, that's what I was talking about. I feel like neurodivergency will attract neurodivergency, and just in the same way, like like you birds of a feather flock together, right? It's not to say like in a weird elitist way, just in a very neutral way. Like people get attracted to the type of content creators and content that they like, right? Like some people are just not I'm just not an audience for them, right? And vice versa. So it's kind of like this where it just feels like I think a lot of people who stuck around on my streams could relate to the way that I was talking on my streams. Definitely not to my gaming. I know I suck, but like to the things, the topics I want to bring up. They're interested in that. They're open-minded about it. They're able to keep up with me, even though I kind of weave in and out of stuff and I'm not very articulate sometimes, especially when I get excited. So yeah, you still feel the need for a creative outlet, but you still can't bring yourself to get back at drawing. It can be hard, but I do feel that like it's good to have some type of outlet where you get to express yourself, um because sometimes like that is the only chance you're given to express yourself, especially if you're a highly masking person. um you enjoyed the journey and you learned more about ADHD. Yeah, that's interesting because Kathy, you've known that you had ADHD since you were a child, but I guess like you never really like looked at it. And I know that you mentioned that recently you're even considering medication and stuff. Like you're more open-minded about it, I mean, than you used to be.
the last decade, I've struggled on YouTube about exactly what niche was mine, but I always came back to people. I love people. So the joke is the kind of autism I have is the people kind, not the math kind. But you know what?
Okay, that's interesting, right? Oh, this is actually a very cute screen cap. She looks very cute here. Anyway, yeah, I think that I also have no like I struggled with streaming at the beginning because I was like trying to see what other people did, trying to copy them, and the face cameras, they're so charismatic, and I was like, I can't do that because I can't even look at the camera. Even now, I can't look at my camera, even with the VTuber model, because it's weird, it's awkward. Making eye contact with the camera is weird. Making like like when I'm talking sometimes I can't look at chat because that feels like eye contact. So having like a VTube model be here where you guys can't really see that or tell that, I feel like that makes me feel so much more comfortable. And I was trying to figure out like these are the things I'm interested in, but like yeah, like I don't really feel comfortable exposing my body, so yoga was out. It's not fun to like I don't know how to show um what it's like when I'm doing like learning a new language or anything like that. So like, learn with me streams were not that great. But I do feel like it's been fun to kind of like go into, all right, I started a game. Let's hyperfixate with me because because like at like people who come to this community are like just as like excited about learning the lore and stuff as I am, and like doing the really full deep dives and open discussion and talking about like media. And I think that like that's the nice thing about our little community is we are very focused on like very particular little niches, but it's been nice to have like that instead of trying to appeal to like a broad audience. I don't know where I was going with this. That's just what this made me think of. Um, you were considering it, then you realized how hard it is to get an appointment and started you just want a bag of weed. I'm sorry. Oh no. Oh, I do hear there's a shortage of ADHD medication these days, so that could be part of why it's been so hard. I'm so sorry, Kathy. That sucks.
But that makes a lot of sense given that I myself am a queer person. I have immigrant parents. I grew up a little bit outside the box my whole life. I was homeschooled till I was 15, and then I did a little bit of public school. I was in theater. I love to read. I've read thousands of books. Like my life starts, it's always made sense to me as I've been on that introspection journey, and it gets, it becomes more I guess it makes more sense as I grow and as I age and as I hopefully seek wisdom. But getting this assessment kind of brought a big puzzle piece together. So let's talk about why I got assessed. So
And before we move into that, she mentioned she reads thousands of books, and I didn't think that was weird until I realized that was kind of weird. I would say I've read thousands of books, right? Like, 'cause I'll read out entire series, right? Even like I must have read thousands of books because like literally in a span of a month I could read like 100, and it's been like very many months of my life, right? And I used to go to the library and read all the time. So I didn't realize that like I got so fixated on like series that like I would literally read the entire Babysitter's Club like series from beginning to end, like basically within like a couple of months, or like depending on the availability of the time to go to the library and whatnot. And I would finish books in like, like multiple books in a day, right? Um like all of that stuff like was I didn't realize that wasn't usual. I thought everyone could do that, which is why I was so confused when my friends told me that almost none of them finished their full course of like reading materials in university. Because I think the only book that I did not finish in university was Moby Dick. 700 chapters of Naruto manga in a single day. Oh my gosh! Wow, that's impressive. You only
So
read fiction.
I
That's
got
okay.
assessed because of a few years ago. It's kind of started my journey. A few years ago, my content changed and I was working on and focusing on philosophy and my audience growing and trying to find ways to give tools to people that weren't quite fitting into their bubbles. So I created a system called The Levels, which is my observational philosophy. And I think a lot of people in the past thought, oh, The Levels was inspired by her borderline, which we'll talk about misdiagnoses in a second. But I was diagnosed in 2017
Takes you
with
like weeks to
borderline.
finish
And
one
so
book.
people thought,
Yeah,
oh,
and that's
Brittany's
okay. I just didn't realize that
borderline
that
is
was
so
like more
obvious. Like she's
common.
so black and white. She's so specific. Her sense of justice is so high without ever considering that instead of borderline, it's probably autism. And since women are often misdiagnosed with borderline when they are autistic, I'm not that shocked. So
So I looked into like borderline as one of the things like to, cross-reference while I was like figuring out if I was autistic, and definitely out like no, I don't think that I'm like, borderline at all. But that was an interesting thing to note, was that a lot of women get misdiagnosed for that. And I think it's because though they go through like more meltdown phases than I do. Like I generally don't, and I honestly don't know how. I guess it's because I'm very self-accommodating in ways that I didn't realize.
I created this level system and I was really into introspection and extrospection. I was really trying to be self aware and I was trying to figure out where
I
I
also
belonged
want to
in
be
the world. My
self-aware.
whole life has been trying to figure out where I belong in the world, which could sound like borderline or it could be autism. And so that's why we get tested. It's why we go through those appointments with those doctors to try to assess ourselves. Now, I'll get into misdiagnoses in a second, but before I jump in, I also want to give kind of credit to my community because my friends and family were also saying, hey, Britt, I think you might be autistic. Have you thought about getting assessed?
Wow,
But
friends and
more than
family
that,
too.
my community felt drawn to me because they saw
I just made eye
themselves in
contact with
me
the
and they were
screen, and it
autistic.
scared me.
And so they'd say to me, hey girl, I love seeing an autistic woman on the internet hold her own. And I'd say, I'm not autistic. I'd say, I can't be autistic. I hold down a job. I really did say this. I said this to a friend of mine. I was like, my audience thinks I'm autistic, but like, I work, I pay my rent, as if people who are autistic don't do those things. It's just the stigma because of burnout is that autistic people can't quite make it in the traditional work, but I don't work a traditional job. But when I tried to, I would burn out. So my self awareness levels were there, but I forgot that the nuance of autism is that you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
So this reminds me of like a little YouTube short that Morgan posted, right? Another autistic content creator, Morgan Foley, I believe her last name is, where she posted about how like your own like autistic thinking of like, oh, I don't check every category, makes you kind of misdiagnose yourself, or like, like makes you think you can't have autism. And that's what this made me think of, because I also went through the same thing where it was like I'm not autistic. Like I don't have like sensory issues or things like that, right? Like I don't, you know, I work a full-time like, regular type of job. Although like Mike, another content creator, he also does, right? But like it's just kind of like, yeah, like we just kind of we kind of write off like certain things that like, but we have to remember it's a spectrum. right? It's a spectrum and everyone falls in a different place. And it's more like a color wheel spectrum. It is not like a straight line. So it's just kind of funny that like I feel like almost every autistic person that I know and have seen has had like that moment, like if they're late diagnosed, where they're kind of like, I can't be autistic because of this, this, and this. But it's like it's it's so funny just how like I guess that can be attributed to a form of black and white thinking, but I think it's just more thoroughness. We want to be absolutely sure. So we feel like we have to check every single box. But we don't need to. We actually don't need to check every single box. Aside from the ones on the DSM-5.
It's not a monolithic experience. So then I started to watch autistic content creators. I started to receive the feedback from my audience as an opportunity to observe myself. I started to ask my autistic friends, like, do you think I have autism? And they're like, girl, obviously. And I was like, no. And they're like, yeah, girl, get tested or not. You know that you have autism. And I was like thinking about it. And I was like, do I know this? Now, because my brain is the way that it is, I really need the diagnosis to be correct, or I need the tools that the diagnosis gives me to work. So when I was diagnosed in 2017,
Okay, I like how she said that. I need the diagnosis to be correct or the tools to work. Because yeah, sometimes I'm just interested in the solution. Right? And I think that's why like I'm very insistent right now on just saying like I'm autistic because it's the only diagnosis quote unquote that makes sense because I've tried the tools, I've tried the advice, and a lot of it works. Like it's not that everything works all the time, but I do find that well, or I realize I was already doing some of those things that are recommended to me by autistic content creators. Like, oh, I already do give myself time to transition for things. So it kind of is like, yeah, it's kind of like that. I feel like if the tools work, I feel like that's enough, you know?
the borderline, the DBT really changed
You
my
were if by
life.
that. Yeah.
It saved my life. And I know DBT is a form of therapy that can work for autistic people and borderline people and all kinds of people. But for me at the time, I was diagnosed after one session and a nine
Wow.
question test with borderline personality disorder. So let's talk about that sort of stigma or association with women who are misdiagnosed with borderline over autism, and take into
Don't
consideration
judge me
that
because I know
regardless of your
them. Yeah.
diagnosis, you're really looking for tools that change and help your life.
Yeah,
The
because it
big
could be
thing for
multiple
me in
things, right?
2017 when I
Could
was
be
diagnosed,
ADHD.
I really didn't care about the stigma of borderline. I cared about whether or not the DBT would help save my life. And it did. Once I got that therapy and I incorporated it into my life and I had a relationship with my philosophical lens, I was able to change my life. I was able to maintain work. I was able to maintain the goals I had. I was able to change my whole lifestyle. I was able to wake up every day happy and go to bed every day happy. So
That's
it didn't
good.
matter to me if
I
I was
don't feel that way.
misdiagnosed. But this time around, when I went to go get assessed for autism, I really needed it to be the right diagnosis. So I went for my assessment
Oh, I wonder
and I
why that
went to
is.
a group of people that specialize in diagnosing autism in women
Is it because like
because,
that was the particular
autism used to
goal?
be a boy thing where they thought like boys get autism and girls don't. And this is just what life is like living under the patriarchy. So
Yes.
I went to an organization of doctors who specifically specialize in autism in women. And oh, please note that the woman who's amazing and a therapist was not a doctor who diagnosed me with borderline. So even though her therapy was amazing and we had a great relationship, and I'm so grateful for her to, coming into my life, I think it's important to note that I was diagnosed after one session and I'm not sure that it was the correct one, but I don't think it really matters at this point. I'm just saying it in case you yourself are on the journey.
Yeah, I do think that's
Okay,
important to
so
kind of like look at your options. Like even after my therapist told me like, yeah, she agrees. This is a bit of an informal diagnosis, but she is a specialist in this area as well. But yeah, like I definitely qualify for all of those criteria. But like even after that, it was kind of like me still being kind of like, okay, but could it be like other things? I just want to make sure, absolutely sure. Um, so I don't know. I feel like I'm still working on that, and maybe that's why I'm still so obsessed with autistic content and learning about autism, and I'm still actively researching autism. Is because I feel like I still really want my I really want to be sure, right? I am sure, but I'm also, yeah, like every now and then, but nobody's ever sure of anything, is what I mean, right? But this I actually want to be absolutely sure of.
I go to these doctors,
You're looking
I
for a
get assessed
specific
for
answer, is what I mean.
autism, and they're both neurodivergent, which is really great. and I'm given like a lot of tests. Like, you know how the borderline test was like one test with 9
I
questions? No,
can't
no,
believe
no.
that.
These were like lots of tests and lots of questions. And it was interesting. It was a great experience. They were very compassionate and very thoughtful. They were interested in autism in women, but more than that, they were interested in accurately diagnosing autism in women. And I told them, listen, if you misdiagnose me, it's going to be a big deal because I'm going to change my life around this diagnosis.
Mm.
I'm going to start incorporating more tools, support needs. I'm going to use better language. I'm going to make sure that I use this diagnosis to make my life better because
I
I
don't know
always want
about
to
the
know more
language
about
thing. I don't know what
myself.
she means by that.
And so they agreed and they said, absolutely, we don't want to misdiagnose you, you know, for their research and on
That's
top of
true.
that, their credibility. And so they gave me a bunch of tests and I wrote a narrative.
Okay, yeah, that's the crazy thing. A lot of people say, like, oh, you can just get any doctor to diagnose you with autism if that's what you. Are you kidding me? Doctors have integrity, right? Like, they have, like, I mean, not every, but, like, a lot of them do. And it's like, why would they mess up their own, like, record by, do you know what I mean? Like, why would they put themselves through all of that, you know? It's so silly. Um, you don't know what it's like to not know you have ADHD.
That helped me express.
Well, you were told when you were young too, and I feel like that's different. If someone told me I was autistic at a young age, obviously there are signs. Obviously, like, I'm also a child, so it's kind of like you're already at a stage where you're preconditioned to kind of accept whatever adults and whatnot tell you, authority figures. But, like, when you are very late diagnosed, it means you went years without being noticed. And so how can you be sure if nobody has noticed until now? Or that's what it feels like. Even though obviously we just talked about how some people have noticed, like he may noticed. But, like, do you know what I mean? So I get it, like, Kathy, what you're trying to say, but I don't feel like that, like, I don't feel like that makes sense for, like, it's not the same situation at all, right? Because um you were told that already at a very young age, and people noticed. Nobody noticed with me, and so how can I be absolutely sure, right?
My life from childhood till now and sort of the struggles that I felt like I faced. So, one of the cool parts of it is that I alone had to write an essay, minimum of 4 pages. I wrote about 7. But separate from me, my partner, who
Overachiever.
I live with,
I'm just kidding.
also had to write their own
Just
1 page
thorough.
paper in which they described living with me. And the requirement of this assessment required either your parent to do it, which my parents were never going to do it,
My parents can't wouldn't.
or your live-in partner.
I don't
And so
have
I was
one.
lucky, I'm married, they could do it, right? Now, the cool part of them contributing to this process was actually having somebody I really trust to observe my behavior. Because if I had had my parents do it, who don't really believe their kids could have autism or ADHD, even though multiple of their kids have been diagnosed, they're going to add in the bias versus my partner who believes in therapy and believes in doctors and believes in science and believes in diagnoses
Biggest issue
and
you've
is
had with ADHD is
neurodivergent
filtering your words.
themselves, they're more than happy to describe factually what it's like living with me and observing me, from my sensory issues to my limited spoons
I
to
have
my
an issue with
burnouts
filtering my
to
tone.
whatever else I'm going through. And it was really lovely to read their narrative. But more than that, the doctors really read our narratives. Like, they really read it because during the assessment, they would reference things from the narratives. And I'm like, oh, you really read them. Like, I dished out my heart and soul. My partner dished out their heart and soul, and you read them. I felt so seen and understood and really cared for during this assessment. And I think being 35 years old and feeling so ready to know more about myself, this reassured me that they were taking it very seriously because, again, a misdiagnosis can change your life for the negative. Even if my borderline was a misdiagnosis before and changed my life for a positive, it's a hit or miss, right? So, like, I was very cautious going into it this time around. So the cool part of the autism assessment is that it kind of lasts based off of your ability to take the test. Kind of, there's multiple tests, and initially the paperwork said, oh, this could take 90 minutes or it could take 4 hours.
Wow.
Mine took about 2.5, and honestly, it could have gone longer, but it was because I kept asking questions about everything, which was kind of cool. So they could observe me, and they asked me to be as unmasked as possible.
That's
And that was
interesting.
really
That would be
nerve
hard, I
wracking,
think.
I think. I was a little nervous about that, but it was a cool process to be able to be myself in front of medical professionals that were really interested in getting to know me. They also
So some people think you're slow or take too long to respond. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of hard too because in your family you see signs of autism and ADHD. We all just thought our quirks were normal. Yeah, that's the thing. Like when you grow up around it, or when you're surrounded by people like that. So it's not necessarily I grew up around it, although I do feel like I take after my dad in that sense, right? But then like I also feel like yeah, with my friends, a lot of my friends, I just thought, oh, that's just the way we are, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah. So I'm normal. In fact, I felt like I was the most normal. I was like, I'm the most boring person here. I'm the most normal person. And then it turns out it was because we were all weird. We were all actually weird.
Also gave me testing in relation to depression and anxiety. I tested non-depressed because I'm not depressed, but I did test for medium anxiety because I am an anxious girly. I
Aim.
definitely suffer from anxiety and I work on it every day, so I wasn't surprised about that. I wasn't surprised I'm not depressed. I didn't think I was. I've battled depression in the past. I usually know when I'm depressed. I've been
Yeah, you're just
pretty
being
stable
careful,
for the last 5
Kathy.
years. So when they asked me about my borderline misdiagnosis or diagnosis, they asked me how I felt about it. Do you feel like you were misdiagnosed? Is it a diagnosis you identify with? And I told them this answer that I think is the most honest. I said, when I was diagnosed at the time, I think it was really appropriate. I think if they retested me now, I wouldn't be tested for borderline. And that's just the fact. So that's where we left it.
I do hear
Again,
that
whether it's a
borderline can
misdiagnosis
go
or
into
not,
remission.
it doesn't
So
matter. The DBT really helped me. Now, I'm going to look towards my notes here so I don't forget anything. One of the things that I'm sure you'll ask me about, and of course, if I leave anything out, just let me know in the comment sections below, is of course, how did my partner react to the diagnosis? How do my friends and family react? So, my partner, of course, was not that surprised. After they finished their narrative, so their essay about me, they were like, babe, I think you're autistic. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, we kind of knew going in that I'd probably be diagnosed autistic, right? So, they weren't that surprised and they were very supportive, of course. And then my family and friends, I was very, I've been sitting on this for a couple weeks now. I got diagnosed a couple weeks ago. And the last 2 weeks have been a lot. I've talked to friends that were supportive, and that's been really beautiful. I've talked to family members that have been supportive. And I've made the conscious decision not to talk to anybody or share this diagnosis with anyone that I thought would be cruel, uneducated, or cynical about it. Anyone who would mock or belittle the experience, anyone who isn't science based or
not only
thoughtful
do I have a
about
response, you
their
have multiple responses.
reactions.
Only a few of them don't
I've
result in
made
you
the
getting harm.
decision not to share it
Yeah, you
with
have like
people one on one. Of
options.
course, I'm putting this video out in the public, so maybe friends and family will see it and be like, I can't believe you didn't tell me. And that will be an opportunity for me to say, I don't think you're a safe space. Let's talk about that. And I know the internet will also use.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when I was first thinking about this, I was like, oh, maybe I can just tell everybody. And then I realized I should not tell everybody. And I'm glad. I'm glad. And it's because a lot of content creators like that I've been paying attention to, a bunch of them had videos or they mentioned it where they were like, do not tell everybody because you want to. You want to go out there and you want to be like, hey, I learned something about myself. And then you realize it's not the same as like telling somebody about a new like hobby that you decided to start or whatever. It definitely can have repercussions. And I'm glad. I'm glad that I decided not to do that. And that they told me not to so that I would like realize that early on because yeah, it's not always the best idea because it's making yourself very vulnerable, right?
This as a reason to discount me and dismiss me because ableism is real.
Yes.
And I'm sure the internet will, the people who don't like me maybe will say this is why Brittany's always been weird. Like she's damaged, she's autistic. Versus, I think the people in my audience are going to say, oh my God, this is why I love Brittany. We really.
Right, if I tell like my my work people, I'm sure some of them will be like, "Ah, that's why she's like that. That's why she's such a stickler about stuff and not in the positive way." Like yeah, I can yeah.
So much. We move through the life similarly, because we're autistic and like that's going to be beautiful. I think the point of me sharing this is the point of me sharing anything that I share with you, which is to make content that I myself have been looking for, to find other people who are going through similar things and to see what tool do they have that I can incorporate into my life to make my life better, right? So speaking of making life better, what does this mean for my life, my work, and my relationships? It means good things are coming. It means better at my job, better at my life, better at my relationships. It means knowing myself gives me an opportunity to support myself better, to be
Yes.
compassionate, to be thoughtful, to communicate clear, and to not beat myself up when I can't seem to keep up. I already have fibromyalgia, which is not that surprising when you're neurodivergent. And then on top of that, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. That's the next testing that, I'm heading towards. So I
A
can
lot
once
of people
again
are
improve my life.
ADHD.
This diagnosis just means my life's going to get better. And I'm so lucky to be born in an era where there are doctors who are specifically looking to help women or AFAB people find a better relationship with themselves, to find the tools to have a better relationship with themselves. And I'm just excited to be alive now.
So that's interesting. I actually recently talked with my therapist about this. Because I keep trying to tell her that I like, I am thinking about a lot of things through like this autistic filter, and she keeps wanting me to like step away from that. Which I do eventually kind of want to, but then like I don't feel like it's wrong to consider that like a lot of the what has affected me has been through this autistic filter, right? Like because like I don't think like she was trying to describe how this is one part of you, autism is one part of you. I'm like, but it's not one part of me. It kind of is me because like everything that is a part of me, all of my experiences have been through like I won't experience it the same way as a non-autistic person, as an holistic person. You know what I mean? So I feel like it is like something I need to consider. And I was mentioning to her how like I don't see this as a bad thing. I don't see being autistic as a bad thing. And I think like because she's looking at this from a very clinical perspective, because she is a therapist, she might be misunderstanding what I mean when I say I'm autistic, because I wanted her to know I'm not saying I am autism. I am autistic. It is a major part of me. It's like if I'm gay, like I'm gay, and that will color like everything that happens to me, right? But it's not a part of me that I just like, oh, a part of me. This is a part of me that's gay, like if I'm gay, all of me would be gay, right? Um, and anyway, so like it, knowing that I'm autistic affects every aspect of my life and the decisions that I make now. And like I make a choice to do certain things. Like how do I make things a little bit easier on myself, and how do I be a little bit kinder to myself when I can't do some things, right? If in the end I choose I can't go to this because I like, the thought of like the crowd is just too much, maybe I won't feel so bad at myself for not being able to handle that. And I feel like that's not a bad thing. I think that's actually a good thing to be aware of that, right? And she noted that like, oh, I look at it in a way that I don't use it to make excuses. I use it to find better ways to accommodate myself. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't think it's bad to recognize you're autistic or to identify yourself as autistic. I think it can only help if you are figuring out ways to make things easier for yourself so that you can get by in this world that is very harsh. You don't need to be so harsh on yourself, at least.
Now, to have those resources now, to be able to have the conversations I'm having now. Along this journey, social media was a huge part of helping me understand myself. I know there is especially in the conservative bubbles, a talking point of everyone's diagnosing themselves because of TikTok. If you watch an autistic content creator and you think you might be autistic, you're more likely autistic than not. Non autistic people, non neurodivergent people, neurotypical people aren't going to watch a TikTok about autism and think they're autistic. It's just not, it doesn't make any sense for them to do that. I've never met a neurotypical person that watches a TikTok and thinks, yeah, that could be me. But I'm sure they exist. So if you're a person
Where's
who has
Shiny
an
to
inkling you
confirm
might be
this?
neurodivergent, you're
Has Shiny
probably
ever looked at
neurodivergent
any
more
of
than
the
not.
autistic content that I
It's
I
just an
send and been like,
experience
oh,
that
that
I
could be
think
me?
more or less is probably better than good to see an autistic content creator, because if you relate to them, there's a reason, right? Now, the reason we go through assessments, the reason we talk to medical professionals
Oh my
is to
gosh,
help
Shiny,
confirm
what?
what we
Were
already
you
know
lurking?
for
I'm
our
sorry
lived
to call you out of
experience. You
lurking.
don't have to get diagnosed to know you're autistic. But for people like me, who am a public figure, who hold myself to a particular standard, I just want to make sure that I'm coming to you as somebody who went through the DSM and went through a medical professional, just because I think it's better. But I didn't need that medical professional to tell me what I knew about myself.
Okay. She brings up a very interesting point. You just came in. Oh wow, incredible timing. Where's Shiny? Yes. Wow, that is incredible timing. Yes, she was just mentioning how neurotypical people do not necessarily look at like autistic content and go, "Oh, that could be me." Like that like most no, most neurotypical people aren't thinking that. And I've heard that before, and I do kind of agree, because I feel like a lot of the things that people post about are like they're not quirks. Like, it's not quirks. Like, it's like, especially when you're autistic, you take it so literally. You're like, no, like when I saw Morgan Foley's little skit about how like literal like language is for autistic people, and how like they like are really careful about time. I was like, yeah, because like there was this whole part where she was like, the pizza's not here. They said it would be here in 35 minutes. It has been 35 minutes. And I'm just, and her like off camera is like, oh, they could be running a little late. And me, I would be the same as the other person. I'd just be like, but you said it would be here at this time. Why would you tell me that? You know what I mean? And I just don't feel like a lot of neurotypical people are like actually getting that anxious about that kind of stuff, like for the exact same reason, you know? Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yes. So I stopped here because she mentioned, yes, she got a professional diagnosis because she is a public figure, and like in a way, for even though she herself knows she's autistic, she like like that diagnosis does help her credibility because she's a public figure, and I do understand that. I fortunately am not a public figure, and honestly, like I really like, I can't risk it. There are risks here for me, right, to getting a like an on paper diagnosis. But that's why I did go to a professional, because I did want to still see a professional, a couple professionals, and I did want to discuss with them and to talk about like you know uh like my struggles, like, and if it could be autism or not. And then obviously, um like, first therapist, and second one, like, yeah, I'm autistic, which is nice because it's like, great, I feel validated. It is nice to have a medical professional also, kind of like, their credibility does help you with the imposter syndrome. Even though they have given me that, like, kind of like, that check mark, I still feel imposter syndrome though. So I feel like you know it, but you also don't know it at the same time. Do you know what I mean? You know it, but you still want to be absolutely sure. And I don't know. I hear from people though who have like a medical diagnosis, like even on paper, that even then they don't necessarily feel it, because sometimes you have a day where things are fine and you're like, I can't be autistic. And then I remember what I was like in high school.
Does that kind of make sense? So, shout out to the content creators that really helped me understand myself better, and a very special and warm thank you to Irene from the Thought Spot, who has been a friend, a colleague, and a peer, who has spent her personal time helping me,
That's
who
really
has
nice that
spent
they bonded over
um,
that.
you know, hours talking me through my assessment and leading up to my assessment, and making content that helped me get to know myself better. And I'm just so grateful that we cross paths on the internet, because she has been an amazing, amazing voice through
You know what I noticed when she said cross paths? Her fingers also like rammed into each other. That was cute.
this process, especially as a late diagnosed autistic woman herself. We're kind of sort of, we need, and we're so lucky to have that support, because, and maybe I'm hoping my channel will be that for you guys, maybe not me personally, but my channel, because being late diagnosed autistic, it's eye-opening, it's really amazing, but it is interesting. So one of the things during my assessment that coincides with this is the high masking part of everything. I have been high masking my whole life.
Relatable.
My whole life. Even as a child, I remember realizing I was different and wondering what it was about me that made parents think I was interesting and frustrating at the same time. That made kids think, Brittany's kind of cool, I want to be her friend. Brittany's really interesting, but kind of weird and kind of rebellious and kind of just does what she wants. My whole life, I've gotten feedback. I remember being as young as 6 years old and getting feedback from people like, Brittany does whatever she wants. Brittany's so different. Brittany, she really, but no one ever thought I was autistic. They
See, that's interesting, right? Because like I hear such different things. And maybe it's again because like I'm Asian and I hide it in a different way. So I mask in a very quiet way, right? Because I'm a demure Asian girl. Well, you're just kind of like yeah, like everybody I think has been like, you are weird, but like you're kind of like masculine. Like you're intimidating. And it's because I would just say whatever I thought, like I was like in high school. fighting with like seniors in my school via newspaper because they would write like, you know, bullshit articles that were homophobic, and I would just be like, I don't care if you're a senior though. I'm gonna I'm gonna, you know, um debunk everything that you've just said, you know? Um like and people wouldn't really want to hang out with me because they thought I was like kind of, you know, a little bit too weird for them. And then there were things that I was really good at and things I was really bad at, and they would just kind of be like, well, we can't figure out what she is.
They thought it was ADHD, which are probably right. And they maybe thought I had mental health issues because I was burning out all the time, which I was. But nobody ever looked at me and thought autism because I'm a mid millennial. They didn't think women had autism growing up. And still, even now, they think it's overdiagnosed instead of recognizing that many women have just been ignored and
Women
neglected.
can't get
And I'm one
autism.
of them. And so, because of my attitude and my personality, I think a lot of people see me. They know I love to work. They know I'm a Taurus. I'm an earthy baby. They know that I'm aggressive. And so they just see me as a person who doesn't need help. But what I realized in my personal life is that I did need help. And I was
Okay, we've definitely talked about this, right? I seem like a very capable person. I've talked with my therapist about this and how like I do not feel like a capable person in my like in my personal life at all. Right? Like I need somebody to help me with the cleaning. I need somebody to help me with the food, right? That was a thing with the logic. Oh, you know what, Shiny? There is a logic, and it's not good logic. I'm going to tell you that straight off. It's not scientific. It's not good logic, but it is the belief, the prevailing belief. So a lot of people, like in previous like studies of like whatever. So here's what they would do. They would test a group of like a very particular group of boys, right? And then they would base all of their findings about like how to classify like autism, like how to like recognize the signs and stuff based on this data from the boys. And then that would lead them to find more boys like this, and then that would lead them to think that autism only affected these boys. And so autism only affects boys who are white and upper middle class, or basically, right? Because those were the only kids they were testing. So it was like a self fulfilling loop or prophecy. And also because a lot of these boys' interests and stuff were like aligned a certain way, it would be like, oh, like autism makes you more logical, more masculine. Like these are masculine traits. So even when so like that's another thing. Like a lot of the stereotypical traits that I have for autism are very like stereotypically like masculine coded. So when I was young, another difference that was pointed out to me very frequently, like to the point where I was like, "Am I just a boy?" Was that like, "Oh, you're very like logic minded. You're very masculine. Like you react to things like a boy, things like that, right?" So I feel like there's just yeah. But this was the 90s. People thought like that.
was in a deficit. So, how do I actually feel about being autistic? I feel relieved. I feel relieved that all the burnout makes sense. I feel relieved that my sensory issues make sense. I feel relieved that the way my partner and I communicate is benefited by the uniqueness of us constructing our relationships specific to our neurodivergency. I'm relieved that this diagnosis gives us better tools to be healthier because our marriage is already amazing because we're both so open and kind and compassionate. But now we get to add in another
Yeah,
element
because
of compassion
you
because
know
that's what a
what to talk
diagnosis
about.
gives you. It gives you an opportunity to really
You can identify
know
the
your
problems when they come
weaknesses
up.
so you can amplify your strengths. How do I feel about being autistic? I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I'm still getting used to it. I feel like when I post this podcast, it's still going to feel weird. I feel like no matter how much I reread my assessment, and I have a confirmation from two doctors that I am definitely autistic, I'm going to have moments of imposter syndrome. But then I also kind of in an optimistic way, like I think it's kind of funny that I made the levels and I categorized people, and my fascination and special interest in life is like people and categorization. So then that kind of makes sense. And then I feel relieved because I'm like, oh my God. Like the test I took for my assessment included like 5 or 6 questions about philosophy. They're like, do you like philosophy? Do you like people? Do you think about philosophy? And I was like,
A lot of autistic people I know are very into philosophy. Like they do find it like very fascinating. And me too. Like I've definitely not even it's not even like it's a phase thing, It does come in and out, but it has been an area of a special interest for me. And I think that's why I love reading novels. A lot of novels are just what are you know what I mean? I love analyzing books because it's kind of like a lot of what you analyze via reading is like what are people's personal philosophies as well. Um
I was like, this test about me. I love philosophy. I love people. And it just makes sense now why this is such a special interest, why I've read thousands of books as a hobby. I've read thousands of books just for fun. Books about
Okay, honestly though, like that's exactly what I do. I love reading. I love reading for fun. I love learning new things. And I love learning like as particularly about people, but books are how you learn about people too. Do you know what I mean? Like even your nonfiction books, you learn so much about like, society and what people and their ways of thinking are. And even if you learn about one particular person, like the person that wrote the book, I think that's so fascinating. And I also like, yeah, like I said earlier, I didn't realize it was strange to have read thousands and thousands of books. Um, like in your lifetime and stuff, but like yeah, just in general because like I remember, okay, when I was in middle school, there was a contest for reading books. And I was like, well, I already read a lot of books, so I should just join this contest, and I'll just like, I'll be able to surely like rank relatively high just because I already read a lot. And I didn't realize how much other people read, but I entered that contest and I was reading like, like I basically read out not in that month, but by the end of my middle school year, I read out my entire library. But um like like I basically like in that contest in that month, I read like over 100 books, and the second prize winner also tried very hard, but they had read like 35. I remember it being like a complete blowout. Like it was very like I won so easily and I was just doing my regular reading, you know. But I didn't realize that that was a lot of reading. I didn't realize that that was like not the average amount of reading that people were doing. Recommend Maji because it's more philosophical stuff. Oh, okay.
science and books about people and books about psychology and vampire books
What is
and
Maji? Is that a series?
Twilight books and all these books growing up. Like, I just read them for fun. I would go to the library and read a book a day for fun. So I might not like trains, but I definitely love books. And I think that's amazing. I think that's really great. I think I'm having an amazing experience with this diagnosis because it helps put my life together. I'm fascinated with why we do what we do. So when I
Oh, it's an
ask
anime
you,
and manga.
who are
Okay.
you in the story? I'm also trying to figure that out for myself. It's hard to see yourself. It really is. And so you, my audience, and my friends and my family who were able to help observe me, to say to me, "Hey girly, I think you should get diagnosed or at least assessed." You're helping me zoom out and see myself. So every time I think of myself, like if I saw myself, would I think like autistic? Because though you can't look at a person and know they're autistic, I think in a safe space, it is okay to say, in the same way queer
I feel
people
like
do,
it's more like
that I
with
can look at a person and
it's not
know. Not
just
always, of
looking.
course. I think
It's more
this is a
like
safe
you
space for me
observe
to
a lot
be
of
able to make
their
this make sense to
videos and
you.
behavior and the way they
But
communicate and stuff, you know?
I could,
And the
sometimes I look at
stories they
people and I'm
tell
like,
and
"You
stuff.
non-binary? Are you queer? Are you autistic?" And they're like, "Oh my God, I am. Thank you." And then I was getting that feedback. And I'm like, am I the autistic girl? Am I that girl that is so specifically like
Your
obviously
coffee doesn't have
pansexual,
sugar?
queer,
Lies, Kathy.
um, gender fluid,
I know for a
whatever,
fact you can't drink
autistic,
coffee without sugar.
adult worker, YouTuber? Am I just that typical neurodivergent girly? And I was like, yeah, I think I am. Oh, what a relief. What
Okay, I don't think I'm a typical neurodivergent girl. Um, I wish I was, because I wish I was that cool, but I am so uncool. Oh man.
What a relief.
One
We watched
teaspoon. Oh
recently
my
on
gosh,
stream
Kathy.
Jacksepticeye talk about being
That's still a
autistic,
teaspoon.
and Sean says, if you're a streamer, you should consider getting assessed, something like that.
Oh, she just mentioned Jacksepticeye. And he said like all of content creators on YouTube are like ADHD and half of them are probably autistic. I remember he said that. And honestly, I have had that thought because fucking every content creator that I really like that I have been like listening to and stuff and I would like just later find out, oh, they're autistic. Like I didn't even know. I would be like just listening to all of this stuff and it would just be like so interesting and I'm like, oh, these people are so thorough. They really do the deep dives because that's the stuff I'm interested in. And or they're really passionate about this thing and they're almost all like ADHD or autistic or both.
That. And I always say that. I always say if you're a content creator, you should consider getting assessed. Because if you make content the way we do, kind of obsessively and in love, and you're here for 10 years and you don't burn out, or if you do burn out, you still come back, and no matter how much money you're making, you're still here, you would do it for free. I always say, pay attention to what you'd be willing to do for free to know the most about yourself.
Okay, I don't know why that went so fast, but yes, kind of, right? So this is relatable. I'm not a major content creator, but as you know, that's because like I don't want to be. But at the same time, I can't stop doing it. Like I can't stop streaming and talking and like so when I mentioned this to my other friend recently and he was like, "Oh my gosh, like he thought it was like a side gig." And I was like, "No, I did it for free." I used to like translate. I basically was just like I want the translations to be accurate, with like the knowledge that like, that I already know of because I know that some translations are very shoddy. And so I would do my own translation for like my idols, like stuff like articles and interviews. And it would be like entire interviews, like the entire like, magazine and stuff. And I would just sit down and fucking do it because I wanted it to be right. Or like, yeah, like my whole stint with fan sites and when I like yeah, and this, like all of this nonsense that I'm doing, like that all of the music video covers that I do and like I put so much money into those and I make nothing back, but it's I can't help it. It's like it's such a great form of like creative release for me, Profound. No, no, it's not profound. Not deep. It's just you were torturing Beck. Yes. Oh my gosh. You had the whitest coffee, Kathy.
because I do a lot of things for free that I now have turned into jobs, but I would have done them anyways. I do
Same.
there
I
the
don't
things,
turn any
my
of it into a
hobbies.
job.
I turned my hobbies into a living because I was obsessed in doing them anyways. You know, they say don't turn the thing you love into a job. I think for some people that is so true, but for me, it just gave me an ability to make a job out of something that doesn't make me burn out. The activity I'm doing isn't what burns me out. I'm usually burnt out because I'm not sleeping enough, which, is related to the fibromyalgia. I usually burn out just because of the social aspect of my job. I mean, there's a lot of socializing, even though I never leave my house. I just burn out mostly because of those things. But if those things weren't always happening, I'm sure I would burn out less. But I do think, like,
You turn everything into a job. Shiny, shiny. Are you sure you're neurotypical? I'm just kidding. Um, but no, it's like it's very interesting. I think some people do that anyway. But I don't actually turn anything into a job that I really love. It's not because of that though. It's just because like I don't want to I'm too lazy to deal with figuring out like finances and taxes and stuff. I'm just like I'd rather not figure out how to yeah. Because I'd rather focus on the thing than on the extra things that come with it. Do you know what I mean? Personally, and this is just for me, I would rather just do the thing that I want to do without any extra caveats. And I feel like turning it into a job would make it become that for me. You working on your car on Sunday?
as an
Yeah.
autistic person,
It's
it makes
that's
sense that
yeah,
I'm
I
burning
think
out on the
I
social
think Kathy,
aspects.
you and
I'm
your
burning
car
out on the
remodeling
lack
and
of
everything
sleep
is
because
your
of my
creative
chronic
outlet.
illness. It also makes sense that I'm autistic and I have a chronic illness, as that tends to be related, and I'm not that surprised. I've obviously been traumatized throughout my childhood, growing up as a queer kid in a conservative home. So it makes sense that my body is harboring a lot of trauma. It also makes sense that I also, on top of that, was autistic. It makes sense that in all the ways my
Yes,
parents
I
tried
keep
to
trying to
help
tell
their
my therapist
kids,
that.
they also weren't willing to go beyond and get their kids diagnosed, which means a lot of my siblings and I have been getting diagnosed as adults. I'm not the only kid in my family that went to seek a diagnosis as an adult.
Ooh.
And I think that should say something about our life. That sometimes, even with good and well intentioned people, sometimes you don't get a diagnosis until you're old enough to pay for one, old enough to get one, have time to get it, and are willing to handle the consequences of that, considering that there are negatives to getting diagnosed.
Yes.
Like, you
I'm
can't
glad she's
immigrate to certain
mentioning this.
countries if you're autistic or borderline. You can't get jobs, adopt children. People think that disability, though it is a disability, is such a disability that just having the diagnosis means you get to be written off as a functioning adult, which is not
Yeah, I
true.
don't want people
Even
to
neurotypical
infantilize
people
me because
have
of this.
dysfunction. Every one of us has functionality and dysfunctionality in within our life, right? In our life. So for me, I'm looking at this diagnosis as an opportunity to be more functional, not less. And I think that's really what a diagnosis is for. It's to give us reasons to get to know ourselves better and do better, not excuses to do worse.
That's what I
So
keep
I'm
telling
so
my
excited
therapist.
now to
I'm not using it as an excuse. I
know
just
myself
want to
more
explain why
and
I'm
to
making these
move
changes.
forward being better than I was yesterday and healthier than I was and kinder and more compassionate. So from one autistic woman to another, congratulations on getting your diagnoses. or knowing yourself well enough to self-diagnose.
Oh,
And of
thanks.
course, I'll leave resources in the description for those interested in seeking an assessment or seeing content creators that help me along my journey. All right, guys, leave your comments in the sections down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
People are so good at their outros, guys. I still don't have one. I mean, I do, but I don't even remember to use it half the time. Anyway, thanks for watching that with me. I really yeah, I subscribe to this channel. I do enjoy listening. Uh don't and I'll put it in the video description area once I post this. This is Brittany Simon. All right. Like, don't subscribe.